আমি কিংবদন্তির কথা বলছি, আমি আমার পূর্বপুরুষের কথা বলছি। তার করতলে পলিমাটি সৌরভ ছিল, তার পিঠে রক্ত জবার মতো ক্ষত ছিল। তিনি অতিক্রান্ত পাহাড়ের কথা বলতেন, অরণ্য এবং সাপদের কথা বলতেন, অতীত জমি আবাদের কথা বলতেন। তিনি কবি এবং কবিতার কথা বলতেন। যে কবিতা শুনতে জানে না সে ঝড়ের আর্তনাদ শুনবে। যে কবিতা শুনতে জানে না সে দিগন্তের অধিকার থেকে বঞ্চিত হবে। যে কবিতা শুনতে জানে না সে আজন্ম কৃতদাস থেকে যাবে। আমি উচ্চারিত সত্যের মতো স্বপ্নের কথা বলছি, উনুনের আগুনে আলোকিত একটি উজ্জ্বল জানালার কথা বলছি। আমি আমার মায়ের কথা বলছি।
Hello everyone, my name is Adnan Fakir and I am here on behalf of the Finding Bangladesh team to talk to you about what we are doing. Okay? So before moving forward, the name Finding Bangladesh itself has brought about a lot of jokes in my life, a lot of puns. So last year, when I was in the UK doing my master's, my dad, on my birthday, sent me this email. And the email he sent was of a Bangladesh map. And it had a header. And the header said that, there you go, you just found it. Now stop wasting your time and go and study. That was his exact statement. So referring back to Farzana's talk about letting go of your inner child, I think it fits in really well. Finding Bangladesh began because we let go of our inner child, because we had questions we didn't have answers to, and we wanted the answers. And that's how the entire journey began. I remember talking to this friend of mine, this British friend, and we were talking about the mythologies of UK, and the Loch Ness monster came up. The Loch Ness monster is a famous monster. There, I'm sure a lot of you know about it. So we ended up talking about for more than an hour. We talked and talked about the different stories behind it, the different findings that they have, and I couldn't be but just a little bit jealous, because he talked about it so passionately, and as if it was part of their identity, as if the Loch Ness monster was his. And I started looking back to my own history, my school life. I started questioning, okay, I know about the Greek mythologies, the Roman legends, but what of our own culture? What if the region of South Asia? What of the region of Bangladesh? What are the mythologies that we have? What are the legends that we have? We don't study that in school. And that really hit me. By then, the journey for Finding Bangladesh had already began. It began back in 2006 when I was still a first-year university student. And we have gone along the way with a lot of barriers. So anyway, with that very question, to bring about the mythologies and the legends that we have in our country, the stories that we have, to bring them back in a fun and an engaging manner to you guys, to the younger generation especially, that's where the entire journey about Finding Bangladesh began. So whenever I go to the different museums abroad, especially Turkey, UK, Netherlands, Greek, Rome, and even UK, I get very envious that they can preserve their stories, the artifacts that they have so beautifully. I get envious that why don't we do the same thing? Why don't we have an amazing museum where we display our culture, our histories, our heritages? We don't have that. And I really hope that's the ultimate goal of Finding Bangladesh in the long term, to be able to portray those stories, to be able to bring them back to you. Okay, so in this talk, I'm just going to talk to you about some of the stories that we're covering so that you have a sense of what we're trying to achieve. So this guy here, this guy has been an inspiration. I really enjoyed him ever since I was a kid. This is a mural of Alexander the Great. He is so great that we have permanently attached the title, The Great, with his name. Whenever we say Alexander, we say the Great. So I was always fascinated by his life, how he wanted to unite all the regions and in fact religions as well. But I was more fascinated when I found out that during his Asian conquest, he approached India and then he went a certain distance and then he decided to go back. He decided to go back because he feared an army of over 4,000 war elephants. And the 4,000 war elephants were from a region called Gongaridai. This is a map from around 60 AD by Ptolemy. And that Gangadik Sinvis, that's towards the south, that region is Gongaridai. Gongaridai literally translates to the wealth of the Ganges, the Jamuna River. And that region was West Bengal and Bangladesh. So the 4,000 war elephants that he was ferrying to advance forward was in this region where we are right now. And I thought that was fascinating. Whenever we talk about Alexander the Great, we don't mention these stories. We think about Western stories, Western civilizations, but he had a huge role here. And the reason he went back was because of us. And that's something that I take pride in. Like, hey, we were brilliant one day. Okay, so why not now? Okay, so moving on to another story. Moving on to the story of the Loch Ness monster. So when I was in Netherlands, I visited this museum, and I saw this sculpture. It's a sculpture of a sea monster. And I was intrigued when I saw this, because in the description it was written that it's a sea monster that stretches over 100 leagues. It was mentioned in the Buddhist religious manuscript Kullabokgo. And this guy dates back to 3300 BC. But what struck me the most is that his home ground, this creature is called the Makara, his home ground is mainly the South Asian side. In other words, the Bay of Bengal. And then I was like, why don't we know about this amazing thing? Why don't we know about this? And I started thinking that, okay, I think I saw this somewhere before. And then I went back home, started thinking over lots of cups of tea, like, where did I see this before? And then I realized that I saw this on many places during our adventures in Bangladesh. And I'm just going to mention a few places. There's one in Joshore. In Joshore, we have this twin temple called the Joraship Temple in Chachra, where in the lower right corner and the lower left corner, there are two lions jumping towards the fruit tree. And the lower right and the lower left, you see two heads. That's the Makara. It's hard to recognize, but it's there. This is in Panamnagar. If you visit Sonargaon, the Panamnagar Museum, it's filled with there. The Makara is all over the place. And this is again in Bagherhat. There's a temple called Ajodhya Temple, which is like a giant beehive. And there's a terracotta plate which shows the Makara there. So then I was like, okay, I saw this before. Why didn't I recognize this? The reason I did not recognize is because we don't know his story. We don't know where he came from. The name Makara is there, but we don't know what he is. It's not written properly in the places we visit, in the museums itself. So then I started asking the question, where did this guy come from? So during the Indus Valley civilization, that's the first trace of the Makara. And in the olden days, boat travels were the most popular methods of traveling. So giant crocodiles used to attack the boats and used to upturn them. So people started fearing crocodiles. And from that fear stemmed the icon of the Makara. The Makara takes out many forms. One of the most common forms in South Asia is that it has the head of a dolphin, the trunk of an elephant, and the body and the teeth of a crocodile. And that's a fascinating mesh. I'm like, can you imagine a creature like that, like actually living, and something that's over 100 leagues long? 100 leagues translates to over 550 kilometers. That's way more than the Loch Ness, believe me. So the reason why I find this Makara creature very interesting is because over the years, ever since 3300 BC, this guy has stayed in our region in various places. In fact, over the years, it has transcended religion into culture. You can find this on Buddhist temples, you can find this on Hindu temples, and even inscription of the Makara head, it got to be used as a design, and can also be found on the terracotta plaques of a mosque called the Qutub Shah Mosque in Kishoreganj. And I thought that was brilliant. This is one icon of fear that has managed to transcend religion and into our borders. The word dragon. Dragon comes from a Greek word, which, not exact pronunciation, it's pronounced sort of like drakon. Drakon means a sea serpent. This exactly is a sea serpent. And a famous French archaeologist in an academic paper mentioned that the Makara is probably one of the ancestral forms of a dragon. So not only do we have an amazing sea creature, the mythology of a sea creature, but he might also be the ancestral form of a dragon. And that to me is amazing. so much originated from this place that we don't know about. And this is one of the examples. So the star sign Capricorn, or what we call in Bangla Mokkor Rashi, also comes from the Makara. So a lot of things get tied in together whenever we talk about this creature. So I'll move on to the next story, and we'll move further south. So the more you travel the country, the more you'll understand the people. And instead of talking about a Borishallara erukum, a Khulnar Manusha erukum, you get to see the good sides in them. And I think that the people living in the Sundarban are the most resilient people in Bangladesh. They persevere like anything. The honey hunters especially, the woodcutters, their livelihood depends on the forest. And inside that forest, there is one single remaining temple left in the Bangladesh side of Sundarban. And that temple is called the Shipsha temple, the Sheketek temple. I didn't know about this. When we started doing our research, we found this out. So it's pretty deep, and I don't think any of the tour guides right now go there. So we had to organize our own trip into the jungle. But what's fascinating is that this temple was made in the 1600s by this Raja called Pratap Aditya. I don't know, many of you must have heard about his name. So he, in fact, built an entire fort here, entire city. And the purpose of the city was to fend off Portuguese and Arakanese pirates. Between 1550s and 1650s, Chittagong was a base for pirates in our region. So, and they were trying to enter Bengal and take over. And he built this fort just to fend them off. Over time, the entire city got demolished, the entire fort, and this temple is the only thing that's remaining right now. And I thought, like, okay, why is only the religious monuments left? What happened to the other buildings? Even now, every year, there's a group of people who enter the Sundarbans and visit the temple just to pray to Goddess Kali. And when we visited the temple, we found tiger marks, scratches inside the temple. Because it's a house, the tigers use this place as a shelter during storms. So tigers often move around this area. So whenever the pilgrimage happens to the temple, some people quite often do fall prey to tiger attacks. And I thought that, okay, how resilient are they? Even though they're facing tiger attack, they decided to move on. It's our pilgrimage, we will go. I thought that's fascinating. That's a tiger mark, that's me lying beside him just for comparison. Anyway, so probably the most famous Sundarban story is that of Bon Bibi. I hope a lot of you have heard about Bon Bibi. Bon Bibi, I won't go into the entire folklore, but she is the guardian protector of the Sundarbans, the land of the 18 tides. And Bon Bibi, and if you visit the Sundarbans, you'll find several temples of Bon Bibi scattered throughout the forest. What I really liked when I went there is that people, especially the people whose livelihoods depend on the forest, before going inside the forest, they pray to Bon Bibi for protection. And they pray as part of their culture, irrespective of the religion. Muslims and Hindus, both of them pray to Bon Bibi, and quite often in the same temple ground. And I thought that was brilliant. Here we are fighting with our religions. Which religion do we come from? What's our differences? What's the divide? Why should there be a divide? In the Sundarbans, which is not that developed, obviously, there are Hindus and Muslims who pray at the same time to the same deity for protection. And that's transcending religion. That's our identity. That's secularism. You move out of a box. You step out. You say, like, okay, this is fine. I'll respect my religion. You respect yours. That's what they do. Okay. In the folklore of Bon Bibi, she gave a lot of messages. Two of the most famous messages is that everyone who enters the Sundarban has to enter the Sundarban unarmed. And they have to enter with a pure heart. And these words are exactly there in the folklore. They have to enter with a pure heart so that they don't steal anything or don't deprive the forest of anything. And I think that's a big message for us, especially with the Rampal power station happening there. We must make sure whatever activities we do not harm the forest. And that's something that has stayed within the folklore over many generations. So in fact, during the Mauryan Empire, which goes back to the 4th century BC, the system that they had there, the system of governance, they actually had a department of forestry. And the job of the department of forestry was to make sure that when the Sundarban was being used as a river route, that the forest is not harmed. So this culture has been there long ago, and it's something that we should maintain. If people at that time could understand the importance of the forest, we should understand it now. So I'll just mention two more stories, and then I'll move on. slowly conclude. So how many of you have visited Bogga Lake in Bandarban? Oh, brilliant. Some of you have. Lovely. Okay. So the Bogga Lake is a brilliant place in Bandarban, and it's absolutely stunning. So before Bogga Lake was there are two stories connecting to Bogga Lake, and I think this is good because it kind of shows the conflict between a folklore and real-life stories. So the folklore says that before Bogga Lake was there was a village right on top of Bogga Lake called the Kumi village. And a villager of the Kumi village accidentally wandered into the forest and killed and ate a deity. The deity was in the form of an animal. He didn't know, but the deity got really angry. She got infuriated and said that, okay, you destroyed me, I'm going to destroy your village. And that's what the deity did. It took the form of a dragon. Again, the reference of a dragon comes up, probably a sea serpent. Came about and destroyed the Kumi village, ultimately creating a vacuum, and that vacuum eventually became the Bogga Lake. Geologists, on the other hand, say that Bogga Lake was created due to rainwater being collected over a span of over 2,000 years on a dead volcano. Okay, that's what the geologists believe. So my question is there any connection between the folklore and what the geologists say? Could it have happened that maybe, perhaps, during that time, a volcano erupted in a nearby region, a volcanic ash or a small ball of fire fell down, and people started thinking, hey, that's a dragon, that's our deity, she's angry, that's why she's going to kill us. You don't know. Maybe they're connected. Maybe that's how the folklore came about. I don't know the answer. I don't know whether I ever will, but I'll never stop looking. So one good example of how folklores or real-life stories eventually transcends into folklores is that of Abhayanagar in Joshua. It's in a village called Bhatpara. There are 11 temples there, 11 temples that are barely standing, I should add. So 11 temples, and the folklore that goes about relating to those 11 temples is that the king that used to reign in that region, the king did not have any children. Interestingly, the king craved for a daughter. The king wanted a daughter. So he prayed to Lord Shiv, he was a Hindu king, saying that, okay, Shiv, please give me a daughter, and if I have a daughter, I'm going to wed her to you. She's going to become your wife. That's the folklore. So after a year, the king had a daughter, and when the daughter was roughly 10 years of age, the king wedded the daughter to Lord Shiv. So how do you marry a mortal to an immortal person, to an immortal being? He built these 11 temples as the nuptial house, dedicated to Lord Shiv. And Princess Abhaya, that was the name of the daughter, spent the rest of her life in the temples, looking after the temples. She lived there, she died there. And the name of the region is called Abhayanagar in memory of her. Now, so we got this folklore, so we went to the Joshua Library and we started digging into what could have been here. And we found that in the 11 temples, near about the beginning of the 19th century, there was a widowed woman who used to come to the temples. She didn't have anywhere to go. So she stayed in the temple. She spent the rest of her life there, looking after the temples, tending to people, whoever came to pray. And that story, the story of that woman, she left such an impact on the people of the region. Her story, over time, transformed into the folklore of Princess Abhaya. So in a way, in an indirect manner, that widowed woman became a princess. And I think that's beautiful. That's one of the broken down temple places. It's not being preserved. So before I end my speech, there are certain aspects that I'd like to point out. First is that the terracotta of a Makara that I showed before, majority of the temples right now, or even mosques, the terracotta plaques that used to be there, they're being lost. They're being stolen. And that's a huge problem. In fact, if you go to Gulshan 2 Market right now, on the second floor, there is a store that sells original terracotta plaques. And I found an exact original terracotta plaque of a Makara there. And I was heartbroken. And if I'm right, that piece is probably from the Ajodhya temple in Bagherhat. So pieces are being stolen, pieces of our history are being stolen and being sold, and we're doing nothing about it. The reason being is that we don't have an interest towards these stories. The more interest we have, the more we want to know about our own legends, our own mythologies, our own histories, the more we'll start caring about these places. The more we'll travel, the more we'll visit, the more we'll know more about ourselves. And unless we do that, unless that culture is cultivated within us, we will not be able to save these sites. So my request to all of you, coming back to that, The entire purpose, the goal of Finding Bangladesh is for you guys to get out of your home. Get out of Dhaka, or go anywhere. Anywhere you think that you will find stories, you'll find a part of yourself. Know your country. And eventually it might help you better understand yourself, have more pride, and might also let you unleash the child inside of you, as far as Anna said. So one fun fact about how we travel in Finding Bangladesh too is that because most of the sites are in very remote areas that we go to, we made our own vehicle for traveling, and we call it the loo on wheels. The reason why we call it the loo on wheels is because we actually have a loo attached with it, because wherever we go, we face hygienic problems. There is not proper sanitation, so we're like, let's take proper sanitation with us. And that's what we did, and that's how we travel. Okay, that's a closer view of the loo. Okay, and that's the team. That's the core team. Our core team consists of 14 members. Our extended team goes much beyond that, over 50 people working on this. But the amazing fact is that we're all students, every single one of us. When we started this project, all of us were students. I was in my first year. A lot of people were doing their L-levels and their HSC. So the thing is that if you have questions in your mind, if you have objectives, it doesn't matter what your age is. We don't live in an age where if you're small, you're constrained. You have an idea. You want to go forward with it, go ahead with it. If you persevere, if you stick to it, you will get to places. That's pretty much the end of my speech. Thank you for listening to me. Please share the idea with everyone. Thank you.